All right, so Siddhartha sat under the Bodhi tree. He was tempted by Mara, the demon, and the demon's sons and daughters, things like greed and anxiety. He refused to be tempted. He refused to move from his task at hand. And then he reached Nibbana, or what we would call Nirvana, and gained enlightenment. Then he hesitated, and he looked and saw all these problems of the world, and figured he could go on to Nirvana. But then looked again, remembered his vow to help liberate all beings, and rather than die or pass on to Nirvana at that time, he started a ministry. The ministry lasted about 45 years. Those who would follow him who were advanced, became enlightened, were ready to enter Nirvana, were known as arhats. The community they formed was the Sangha. We mentioned that going through the history of that time. Those who joined the Sangha would take a vow, known sometimes as the three jewels or the triple gem. Each part of the triple gem begins with the phrase, I take refuge. So the first one was, I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. What does Dharma mean for Buddhism?
Was it the rules of nature?
The rules of nature and the teachings of the Buddha. And then I take refuge in the Sangha. The ideas of Buddhist teachings were intellectual. They weren't based on all of these different little spells, incantations, etc. that the Brahmins spoke of. There was an act of submission and an object of worship to a sense, but it was different and unique compared to all of those different ideas of Hinduism at the time. Remember, when he is creating this middle path, this middle way, when he is sharing it, the Upanishads are still in the process of being written. So Hinduism is primarily a Vedic religion at that time. And then you have the idea of a sociological expression, the interaction between the monks and the lay people that would develop over time. The idea that you would have different schools of thought. Theravada, which means the way of the elders, and Mahayana, sometimes referred to as the big raft or the great vehicle. Vajrayana, also known as the thunderbolt or diamond, which is Tibetan Buddhism. Now, one of the core teachings, core concepts related to Buddhism is this notion of the Four Noble Truths. Who can tell me, I know it is on the board, but who would like to tell me what the first truth is? Right on the screen. Yes.
Suffering is inherent in life.
Exactly. All life is suffering. All life is comprised of ill, pain, bitterness, frustration, jealousy, competition. These things which cause us to see that everything seems to be some degree of suffering. What is the cause of suffering?
Desire.
Okay. Second truth, the cause of suffering is desire. By desire, we mean anything from cravings to attachments, to what we want, to what we think we want, what we believe might make us happy for some length of time. These two noble truths are constantly in a cycle. Let's say you don't feel good. You are sick. When you're sick, do you think that you are suffering? Yes. No. You want to get better. You desire to feel better. You're suffering because you don't feel good. Well, sure enough, you get some antibiotics and they make you feel better, right? But then you want to make sure that you eat healthy or you stay away from people who are sick so that you don't get sick again, which means you're actually still in a state of anxiety or dis-ease. If you don't have love, a significant other in your life, and you desire that significant other, you are frustrated, anxious, any number of different aspects of suffering. And sure enough, you find that love, and oh, you're so happy, except all of a sudden you're afraid, what if you lose them? What if they stop loving you? What if you stop loving them? And you're still in a state of suffering. And sure enough, because you're in that state of suffering, you do end up losing them for some reason. And now you're back to suffering. So whether you have it or don't have it, you're suffering. The Dalai Lama, actually, in regards to this, did a speech at one point, and you can actually find it on YouTube, where he says he has a check for $1 million, but that $1 million cannot bring inner peace. Why is that? Why is it getting a check today for $1 million would not erase suffering and could actually cause more of it? Would you be afraid of losing it? Would you be unsure of how to spend it? Would you be untrusting of those near you because they're all going to want a piece of it? Would you be afraid that you spent it incorrectly? Could it promote feelings of anxiety, distrust, frustration, pain? Now, Siddhartha said that there could be an end to desire, which is the third truth. And he said that the way to end this desire is through what is called the Eightfold Path. Now, our groups aren't quite full, so we'll just go ahead and do a quick run through of the Eightfold Path, and we'll try and go in more detail on Tuesday as the group has a chance to go into more detail on their own. So the Eightfold Path is generally split into 8 things that start with the word right. This makes it easier to remember if you think of it being the Eightfold Rightfold. A little mnemonic of sorts to remember it. So there's right view, how you understand the Four Noble Truths. Right thought, keeping your thoughts away from anger, jealousy, competitiveness. Right speech, avoiding frivolous gossip. Right action, action that is free from harm. Right livelihood, that the job you have should not be causing harm in and of itself. Right effort, the effort to clear and calm the mind, to clear it of the distractions. Right mindfulness and right concentration. Now with mindfulness and concentration, you have what's listed below number 2, dhyana, meditation, which includes right effort as well. In Buddhism, right concentration is listed last because it is the last part of the equation. The, quote, beginner, or not even beginner, the most common types of meditation found in Buddhism are not about emptying and clearing your mind of everything at the beginning of the process. Rather, it's usually to start with the ideas of right mindfulness or right effort by focusing on something such as a mantra, as mentioned in the video of Nichiren Buddhism. Or right mindfulness can be any number of different types of meditations where you become aware of the 4 stages of mindfulness, which go hand in hand with the 5 skandhas, which should be getting to today here shortly. So the other parts of the Eightfold Path go into morality of speech, livelihood, action. Seeing that what you do in life does not cause pain to others, that your actions are peaceful, the practicing of ahimsa. And then also this includes the idea of prajna, insight, wisdom, knowledge. That knowledge which would be gained through that idea of taking refuge in the Dharma, the laws of nature, the teachings of the Buddha. Alright, so I asked last class if you thought you'd be able to come up with, or I asked you to see if you could come up with a few phrases or couple words that could answer the question, who are you? But had to meet 2 rules. 1, it had to apply to only you. No one else could use those phrases or those words for the definition of who they are. And 2, it had to apply equally in meaning and application from the moment you were born to the moment you will die. So does anyone have any thoughts about how they would answer that question? Who are you? How many words? Doesn't matter. You can use 20 words if you want. But it has to be able to describe only you, nobody else, and it has to fit accurately from birth to death. Any thoughts?
Do you have one?
Well, I'll share a few thoughts of previous students. If anyone.
Not apart from, what describes someone
Can you
else.
give us an example of one of the previous students? So we just
You are you, but what does that mean? Couldn't somebody else just say, well, I am me? And she could say, I am me, speaking.
Yeah, about me has it has different connotations.
What is the me that is you?
All right,
What is
Right.
No, you have to use something more than just saying me. Because would you say that you have changed from the moment you were born till when you were alive?
I am a human.
Is anyone else human in here? So I mentioned that fingerprints don't work because while fingerprints are unique to each individual person, technically they change from birth to death. Usually if a student or a couple students are in nursing or going pre-med in some form, they'll mention something along the lines of DNA. DNA is very individualistic. No one else has your exact same DNA. Even identical twins don't have exactly the same DNA. All the genetics, there can be different things turned on and off, even in identical twins. But I have a question for you. Does anybody know if your genetic expression and your genes can change from the time you're born to the time you die? What do you think the answer is? No? Yes.
I need some evidence. I don't think that's true.
All manner of different, environmental
Like
things can take place that alter your genes to come on and off. The whole idea of what you eat, how you live, different diseases can show up in one twin and not show up in another twin. And so there can be changes over the course of one life based on all manner of different outside influences.
But that's not changing your physical DNA.
Yes,
that's
it is. It's turning on and off different genes.
Like mutations?
Yeah, genetic mutations. Every single cell in your body changes pretty much over the course of 7 years. There's only a couple different types of cells that actually even last more than 7 years in your body. Most cells in your body only last 5 to 7 days before they die and a new cell comes about. Platelets are about 5 to 7 days. So that doesn't quite work. Someone will say, well, they believe they have a soul. Hinduism has the belief of a soul as well, the Atman. The Atman is that innermost, unchanging entity, that soul that is what makes you you. But there's a problem there as well. If a person believes there are multiple places that an entity can go at death, that means something changes the soul because it could go to multiple places after the physical death here. Now, if a person believes there's only one destination, and no matter what you do in this life, you do not change the status of your soul, then that would work as a good definition of who you are that's changing.
But who's to say that your like predestination or whatever was, like let's say there's multiple places to go, who's to say that that wasn't going to be the same when you were born and it just never changed?
Exactly.
Saying like you're a vessel.
Yeah, there's those views. Siddhartha, though, ultimately decided none of these things work, and he didn't even know about DNA. But he noticed because, of course, he saw old age, and he saw sickness, and he saw death, and he realized all the different events that can change. So, for Buddhism, is the idea that there is no self. There is no unchanging interior entity at the center of the being. No soul. Because there is a belief in reincarnation, various places such as heavens and hells, how does the concept of an Atman work in conjunction with the concept of the real samsara? And this gets hung up sometimes with students trying to figure out, well, wait a minute, how is it you have no self? The you that you think is you doesn't actually exist. And yet, it's going to somehow be reincarnated from this life into the next. Which brings us to the 5 skandhas. So the 5 skandhas, one way you can think about this is there is a notion in Buddhism called tathata, which means thusness or momentariness of existence. Now sometimes tathata is connected to this idea that there are waves. And on these waves travel impartite particles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 waves. So each one of the waves can represent one of the skandhas. And so we think about the first skandha, the physical body. So the physical body is constantly changing. We've realized that in the discussion just now. Cells are constantly changing. So what you call the physical body changes between the time you're born and the time you die. It doesn't remain exactly the same for anyone. The dana, and so real quickly, so in this life you have these different particles that represent all the changes in your physical body. So then you have the dana, which are senses. And generally we say, even though there are more than 5 senses, we generally say typically 5 senses. But I have a question for you. Does your sense of smell change when you are sick?
Yes.
Does your sense of sight, or is there a chance that your sense of sight will change throughout your life? Your sense of hearing, even your sense of touch can be disrupted at times. So your senses also change throughout your life. Okay. Now, next we have the perceptions. Perceptions are how we interpret the senses. I smell delicious chicken and I think it's the most wonderful, amazing smell ever. And then after I get sick to my stomach a couple times, all of a sudden, I no longer like that smell. Or I used to detest the taste of avocados, and now I love the taste. Or I am in love with a person, and then all of a sudden I'm not in love with that person. Or somebody I used to dislike is now somebody I like. Our perceptions of the world we encounter can change between birth and death. So Rupa, Vedana, and Samjna constantly change throughout our lives. All those waves going and flowing in the void change. So then we get to the last state. They don't change as much. In fact, sometimes you'll have the same samskara from this life into the next life. What is a samskara? Samskara is a habitual mental disposition. Something that you are attached to that in some way, shape, or form is what you believe identifies you, whether you're consciously aware of it or not. Now, there are positive samskaras. The positive samskaras are used in part to ensure that when the Dalai Lama dies, they can locate the next Dalai Lama. They bring out a number of different Tibetan singing bowls or prayer flags or different things, and this child is going to be able to identify which ones belonged to the Dalai Lama, because the child is the reincarnation. But sometimes it's easier to understand samskaras in their negative sense. So, psychologically speaking, a person who is abused in childhood is most likely to become what as an adult? Abuser. A person who is addicted to cigarettes completely and absolutely fully overcomes their addiction to cigarettes. But what is likely to happen? Relapse or get addicted to something else. It's called people who have addicted behavior or addicted personalities. That's the idea that you are so attached to something, you keep bringing it into your life, positive or negative, in a circle. This can also be something where a massive event happens that shapes your ideology, your beliefs, your consciousness, this so-called entity, from this life into the next. A person who dies in a plane crash in the next life might be afraid to fly. Or a person who is a great pianist in the next life might be a child prodigy, because they're so connected with what they did in their previous life. So those are the samskaras, and they do go from one life to the next life at times. Ideally, one is able to move past and realize that samskaras aren't actually a quote you. Which brings us to the last one, Vijnana. What could best be called the consciousness. It seeks to verify its own existence as being separate from anything else. It desires to feel like it is an entity, a soul. yet it is not. Every aspect that it is connected with, rupa, vedana, samskaras, can all change. You also have here, and like I said, one of the groups that is looking at no self, I also asked them to look at independent or interdependent or dependent origination. And I will correct that with the page number in the final PowerPoint. As to how no self and these skandhas and interdependent origination all come together to help understand that when we think we see as a self isn't really a self. Nirvana is being able to move beyond the rupa, the vedana, the samskaras, the vijnana. When you die and you're reborn, you might have the same consciousness. Maybe you have that same habitual mental disposition, but everything else is now new, a new body, a new ability to sense things. In the idea of nirvana, the so-called consciousness realizes that none of these things truly exist. Everything in some form or some way is interconnected. Questions that you know of at this moment about no self?
Questions that we have.
Mhm.
So what, I guess my main question has been, so what of it? I mean, that if everything's interconnected, okay, so what's wrong with that? What's unacceptable about that
The part that's so difficult is realizing that one, especially this idea of Vijnana, and thinking about those noble truths 1 and 2 in that cycle of suffering and desire, you want to exist as somebody who's separate than the person next to you. You see yourself, you feel yourself as being separate from that chair. I am not the chair. I am me. And Buddhism is about trying to move beyond that to understand there is no me.
You just have no rest because you always want to be this individual, just you.
Yeah, people naturally seem to want that, but that's what must be overcome. Our greatest attachment, our greatest desire is to exist as an entity, which causes suffering. So we have to be able to overcome that desire and then come to the realization there is no interior, unchanging entity within us.
It's just, when I get to thinking about it, it kind of hurts my brain.
It does. And we'll go a little bit further in hurting the brain today before the end.
I don't know, it's just like a difficult concept to grasp because in Western culture, it's all about us. It's like, there's like beauty campaigns. It's like, oh, you are this. Like, basically, America's just self-centered as a whole. And so, like, I don't know.
It's not just America, it's humanity. We have a desire to think that we are separate from that which is around us. Now, this can be a good or bad thing depending on your belief system, because you can easily argue the opposite side and why it's beneficial to understand separation. All right, we'll come back to some of these when we go through one other aspect of how reality isn't quite real. All right, so in addition to the Eightfold Path, there are generally understood to be 10 precepts. 5 precepts are listed in the textbook. The first 5 are the most common precepts. The second 5 are generally geared more towards monks. In regards to the first 5, the way they are practiced will vary dependent upon whether a person is a lay person or a monk, depending upon which school of thought they are part of as well. So, prohibition against taking life. Do not murder. Do not kill. Prohibition against taking what is not given. Do not steal. Prohibition against sexual misconduct. In modern times, this is most often understood as do not commit adultery. However, historically, and for monks, this rule, this precept can go much further. There are actually sutras and statements about what positions should or should not be used, and what time of the day, week, month, or year you should or should not even have relations. The idea that in some orders of monks, even to quote, take care of oneself can be grounds to remove you from the order of the monks, from the Sangha.
So in Buddhism, monks are not celibate.
Monks are supposed to be absolutely celibate.
They are.
Yes,
They are. Okay.
they're supposed to be.
Supposed to be.
Um, there are some newer orders that have varying ideas and concepts, but by and large, monks are still celibate. And by and large, in regards to the lay people, it's specifically no adultery. But some groups within Buddhism still hold to older or more strict understanding. Prohibition against lying.
What about like rape or anything like that? Rape
Would be, yeah, that wouldn't be allowed.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, there's no rape, and according to most schools of thought in Buddhism outside of the U.S., homosexuality is not allowed. I say most because in Tantric Buddhism, just as with Tantric Hinduism, pretty much all forms of sexuality have their place. But they have a specific place in the course of one's lifetime. If you've ever heard of the Karma Sutra, it talks about all the various types of relations. And some of those ideas go forward into Tantric Buddhism. Prohibition against taking of intoxicants. This is interpreted in various ways. For some people, it merely means no alcohol. For some, it means no hardcore drugs. For some, it means no drugs at all. In which case, drugs may or may not include things like caffeine, sugar, even, has come up as a possible intoxicant. In regards to those that might work in the medical field, sometimes prohibition against intoxicants can include taking any type of medication that could alter the mind, the ability for one to think clearly. So that would be no opioids. When it comes to death, similar to Hinduism, at death you are supposed to be as alert and awake as possible. Most, not all, most lay Buddhists, as well as most monks, actually would refuse treatment with things such as morphine, because the idea is that they are supposed to prepare for the process of death so that they might release all their attachments and go to nirvana, or at least secure a better rebirth, so that their ability to reach nirvana in the next life is improved. The next 5, prohibition against eating after noon. Many, but not all monks take this as part of their rules and laws. In Buddhism, usually they have 2 meals between the hours of about 6 a.m. and 11 a.m. And then there's meditation, prayers, and other types of work to be done in the afternoons. Thai Buddhism, it's not as strictly held to noon as it used to be, but still is the general idea that you try to not eat after noon if you are a monk. And then even lay people are encouraged to not really eat after the quote early afternoon. Prohibition against dancing, singing, and participating in shows. This has had various interpretations over time, especially over the last 20 to 30 years. Does this mean that you shouldn't be part of a documentary? By and large, the answer is no, you can still be part of it. Tibetan Buddhism has something called trance dancing that will take place at temples. Other forms of Buddhism have different mantras that are sung or chanted in a way that it is for the general public to observe. Sand mandalas can sometimes be interpreted in different ways, and they are a public event at this point. So how the interpretation is for prohibition against participating in dancing, singing, and shows varies today. Prohibition against adorning oneself with garlands, perfumes, and ointments. Other than for medical purposes, no salves, no lotions, no creams. Yes, in most orders outside of the US, this also would mean no deodorants, no perfumes. Again, they're eating differently, of course. Prohibition against sleeping in a soft bed. This is an odd one. Yes, monks that travel a lot and stay in hotels are not choosing to sleep on the floor instead of in the bed. However, at monasteries, usually there are simple cots or mats that are placed on the floor. The idea is not to get into that cycle of suffering and desire through sleeping in a soft bed. And then prohibition against receiving gold and silver.
So these 5 things seem kind of bizarre to me, but is it because like all of them are like somewhat tempting for people to want?
They're tempting for people to want, to desire, to crave, to use, to promote themselves over another person, to make themselves or the other person look either better or worse. There can be jealousy. Vehicles are not necessarily owned by a single monk. They're usually owned by the monastery or the temple itself. They're not allowed to own their own property. Technically, the robes they have are not even considered their own necessarily, depending on the order or school of thought. And again, the first 5 are the primary precepts that even the lay people tend to acknowledge. So we'll talk about the different schools next class. I'm going to go ahead and discuss the other more difficult concept. It shows up in Mahayana Buddhism as the doctrine of emptiness, but it also can be seen as part of that third basket of the Tipitaka of Theravada Buddhism, these advanced teachings. It's the idea that expands no self to the understanding of reality. What we see isn't always what is there. And everything we see is based on these interdependent, or dependent, I should say, originations. So, first concept, I mentioned this example in Hinduism. You wake up in the morning, you look outside, it looks like there is a snake coiled up between you and your vehicle. You know, you get anxious and all these things, and you go and you're gonna kill or scare away that snake, and you open the door all ready to do that, and it's a coiled up rope. It's not a snake, it's just a rope. Maybe it's a jump rope. And you were thinking it was a poisonous snake because of the odd colors that it had. But it's a rope, so it's a rope. If I asked every person in here to think of a rope, would you be thinking of the exact same thing?
Yeah, probably. I'm thinking of like a rope you can tie something up with, or.
But what color is it? What is it made out of? Is it thick? Is it thin? Is it small? Is it wide? You know, is it something that would tie a boat to a dock? Is it a jump rope? That is a type of rope. And even jump ropes come and are made from different materials.
Yes.
So, I'll start with the bottom here. Paracopita is the imagined nature. We imagine seeing a snake. The little kid looks up at the sky and imagines that there is a turtle up in the sky. Paratantra is what we call it though. So paratantra is, that's not a snake, it's a rope. Paratantra is saying, that's not a turtle, it is a cloud. That the little kid sees up, looking up in the sky. Person sees what they think they see is water on the road up ahead, when it's really what we would call
So like hallucination.
a mirage. Exactly. But paratantra is still considered the dependent nature. It's not the true self. Paratantra is dependent on what is considered paransapana, the all-encompassing nature, the underlying nature. In Buddhism, the underlying nature isn't necessarily discoverable, though, because everything is in some form dependent on something else. To this degree, you end up with this doctrine of emptiness, which can stretch into how our speech, our language, can be empty or problematic. Remember how at the beginning of class I talked about the word bad and its different definitions in Britain versus the US for that tribal group that was writing their stories now? Where we talked about how the word dank can mean good or bad, wet, or any number of other meanings as well. Well, right now, let's see here. If we went, anyone ever watched the TV show Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? Ever notice that most people weren't even as smart as third graders? Alright, so if we go into a local fourth grade class or third grade class, and we ask all these little third graders to draw us a picture of a tree. Now we live in Florida, so most likely they might draw a picture of, and I am not an artist, a palm tree. Right? Now let's say we travel to Northern California and we ask the kids to draw us a picture of a tree. And let's say they live not far from the redwood forest, so they're drawing a massive tree that's really, really tall. Now let's say we go to New York City, in the city, downtown Manhattan, and we find a group of third graders. And we tell them to tell us which group of kids properly drew a tree, and if they didn't think either group drew a tree, to draw a picture of a tree for us. Do you think they'd accept that either of these were accurate trees for what they were familiar with? No. I want everyone in here to think of a chair. Just think of chair. How many of you thought of a chair that has wheels? No one. Usually at least one person does.
Well, the first chair I thought of was the one I was thinking of.
Okay, so yes, one person thought of a chair that had wheels. Anyone think of a plastic chair?
I thought about a wheelchair.
A wheelchair. All right. What about anyone think of a wooden chair? What about a metal chair, like a folding chair? Anyone? Black chair? Brown. Did it have cloth on it? Did it have a pad on it? Did it have 4 legs, 3 legs, 2 legs, no legs?
4 legs. It's just.
When I'm, what is a chair? So right now, am I sitting on a chair?
No.
So what is a chair?
Something
something that has 4 legs. And
Not all chairs have 4
Something you
legs.
could sit on.
But it has to
something
have
you
a
can sit
back.
on.
It has to have like a back. 'Cause
Something designed for sitting on.
Something you can
This
sit
is a
on.
chair. And if I sit right here, I have something
It's not
behind
a
me.
chair. It's not a chair. It's
it's not
something you
connected to
can
it.
have a. Well, no, I can't explain it.
At what point is a car no longer a car?
It doesn't run when it's a truck. Or when it doesn't look like a
Where
car
is that?
anymore.
What exactly is the difference between a subcompact, a compact, and a normal SUV?
Size.
Is that the only difference?
Yes. The amount of seats.
Yeah. We have all these words, yet what they mean to different people can vary. When you're trying to select what a chair is, it sounds like it should be really easy. That is a simple word. Dependent origination says that what we do is we can imagine a chair. We know this thing is called a chair, paratantra, but we don't know its underlying nature without further description. So in order to describe the you that you think is you end up using all of those skandhas. I'm tall, I'm short, I do this, I like that. Yet all of those parts can change or be interpreted differently. Again, really great movie to watch is Matrix, because it has that idea of what you think you're seeing and understanding of reality isn't necessarily what's there. All right, going back a couple steps. Well, actually, first, questions, comments, concerns, confusions.
I don't even know what questions to ask.
I will deny that I thoroughly enjoy the Shunyata doctrine, yourself, Tathata, Parakalpita, Paratantra, Parakuthana. Of course, writing a 25-page paper that was designed to argue that my paper didn't actually exist. All right, so no questions. So let's go back and go a little bit into detail on a couple of these schools. We'll go a little bit further into detail next class. Theravada, and please between this class and next class, make sure you read the textbook about the different schools. Theravada is taken from the idea of being teachings or the way of the elders. It is that older tradition going back to those beginning initial councils. Theravada has changed over the centuries. Historically, it was the view that only monks would be able to achieve nirvana. Lay people would not. So it was considered a very narrow path. Today, while the focus is still on the community of monks and the idea that the monk's path is superior, there is the notion that a person who is not a monk could possibly reach nirvana. Unlikely, but possible. Further, the roles and responsibilities of lay people have increased over the centuries. And in some forms of Theravada Buddhism, it is possible that a person might not be a monk for their entire lives. Theravada monks are known for begging, and that they beg daily. The idea of walking around the neighborhood, greeting people, offering blessings, and receiving food most often. All right, in Theravada Buddhism, mentioned a moment ago in regards to the doctrine of emptiness, but you have what's called the Tipitaka. Best way to remember Tipitaka is to think of it as a tongue twister. Tipitaka, Theravada, Theravada, Tipitaka. Tipitaka, 3 baskets of Theravada Buddhism. The first basket, the sayings of the Buddha, the sutras. The second basket, the Vinaya, the rules. And the third basket, the Abhidhamma, the works that go beyond the general teaching. Okay, the other form, major form of Buddhism, Mahayana. Originally seen as much broader in scope, Mahayana is the largest. You guys remember that the PowerPoint is available on campus. Just doing a quick reminder there because I see more.
So it gets updated with the information that's on here. So we find it under the section 2. So it's new every time.
As I make changes, I update it. Right now, the only changes I've made from when it was first put up there is I added the page numbers up at the beginning for the timeline and the page numbers for history systems. And the final version of this does have the audio in it, which gets to both this class and the online class.
Has this been happening since the beginning of the class? Since the beginning of the semester?
It's
Okay.
Alright, so Mahayana Buddhism ideally was trying to put out that you wouldn't have to necessarily be a monk to achieve nirvana. It's the larger path, it's the big raft. Now, today, that's still true, anyone can achieve nirvana, but it is still understood that the monk's path is superior. Now, there's one other very big difference between Mahayana and Theravada, and it's this idea of a person known as a bodhisattva. So the bodhisattva is a person who has essentially achieved nirvana. They're right there. They have died. There's nirvana. It looks pretty good over there. But they decide rather than go forward into nirvana, they're going to go back and be born again, so that they can bring other people and help other people on their path towards nirvana.
So it's an actual person.
Yes.
Okay, because there was another term that was somebody up in heaven.
Well, bodhisattvas can exist in other realms of existence as well.
Oh, okay.
So there are multiple places where a bodhisattva could go.
Okay.
So the bodhisattva is the compassionate being. Karuna. Compassion with a depth of empathy. To go beyond kindness to an unconditional type of love, geared though to bring people towards Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism completely rejects the notion of a bodhisattva. Theravada looks at that and says, hey, wait a minute. They are acknowledging there's something to come back from nirvana, which doesn't fit with the concept of no self. Now, Mahayana Buddhism argues that no, they acknowledge it, they've reached nirvana, but similar to how the Buddha hesitated and then began his career, they believe the bodhisattva can be reincarnated. Alright, let's see here. Give you guys time to work.